Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the red rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2, Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low Magazine? Because 4Low Magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. On this week's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we'll be talking with Jon Bundrant. Jon was the founder of All-Pro Offroad. He was also the driver of Tiny, probably the most revolutionary rock crawler in history. So let's talk to Jon about those early days at All-Pro, the early days of rock crawling, and where he's going now and what he plans on doing in the future. Hello, Jon. Thank you for coming on board with us today with Conversations with Big Rich and talking about your history in off-road and how you got to where you're at today. So where did you grow up, Jon?
I was born in Modesto, California. Grew up there till I was like 12 or 13. We traveled around a lot. My parents did. I've lived in Mississippi and Arizona and just all over the country, but mostly Central Valley, California is where I grew up.
What kind of influences did you have as a kid that might have gotten you going in the direction that you ended up going in off-road?
We used to go camping with my grandpa and my uncles, and we would, they had dirt bikes. This was back in the, around 68 to 70. I mean, a long time ago, but, I started riding a Honda Trail 70, I think it was like a 1969. We would go dirt bike riding in the mountains up in the Sierras, just east of Sonora and Tuolumne and up in that area. And we would spend the weekends up there almost every weekend, all summer and into the fall. And so my grandpa and my uncle had a big influence on me. It really got me turned on to off-roading and the mountains and getting out and enjoying it.
So did you race as a kid in anything, motorcycles or quads or three-wheelers or anything like that?
So when I was 13, we moved to Tucson, Arizona. I think I was in 8th grade. I started racing BMX there, and I got pretty into it. I was actually Arizona State champion as a 16-year-old in BMX, and then started racing dirt bikes a little bit, but I really couldn't afford it. I had a really old Suzuki TM 125, I think in 1973. So I raced several times, on the dirt bikes, but, I had to pay for it on my own, and it was tough, being in high school and working at a bicycle shop after school and then trying to keep the dirt bike going. But I did the BMX for several years. And, as I got into cars, about 18 or so, I started getting into wanting to have a drag car, hot rod car, so the kind of BMX I was getting too old for it anyways, but it kind of went away and, got into the cars.
What was your first car?
My first car was a 69 Olds Cutlass, was the first car. It was really slow, but I thought it was really fast. And, I had the Gabriel Hijacker air shocks on the back and, big tires. And otherwise, it was pretty stock. But, yeah, that was my very first car. Not long after that, I got into four-wheel drives, and I got my first four-wheel drive was a 74 Toyota Land Cruiser that I bought. I've had Land Cruisers and Toyota trucks and 4Runners like the whole rest of my life.
I was going to ask you what came first as a four-wheel drive vehicle. Start off in Toyotas, or did you start off in a Jeep and then go to Toyotas? But you jumped right into Toyota.
Yeah, made the right decision. Jumped right into Toyotas. I've just for some reason, I don't know why, I've never really liked Jeep vehicles. I always liked the Toyotas, and so my first vehicle was a Land Cruiser, my first four-wheel drive, and I just kind of bonded with them, and I've always had Toyotas ever since.
So from the Arizona area, that's where you graduated high school as well?
Yeah.
And then at about 18, you got into cars, and then migrated into Toyotas. What happened with that first Land Cruiser?
I bought it off of a used car lot in El Monte, California. After high school, I went to auto mechanics trade school in Tucson. And when I graduated from that, I moved to Southern California. I found Azusa Canyon off-road area. And a couple buddies told me I need to go up there and check it out, if you want to go off-roading. So I did. I actually rode up there with a friend the first time. And then the very next week, I found a used car lot in El Monte. They had a 74 Land Cruiser that somebody had done a 350 Chevy conversion on. It had the Toyota drivetrain in it, but the Chevy engine. I didn't know anything about them. It was a real pile, but I thought it was, it was really cool to me. And I think I was 19. It was really cool. And I started going to Azusa Canyon, and I was breaking axles every weekend and, just having all kinds of trouble. But from that, I learned, how to upgrade it and, started making stuff on my own and just making it a little stronger and beefier, and to where I was actually having fun there instead of working on it all the time.
So from Azusa Canyon, God, I've never even been into Azusa Canyon, but I hear so much about it. One of these days I'm going to have to make a trip into there. But was that FJ that you had? It was a 40, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Was it topless, or did it have the hard top on it when you got it?
No, it had a soft top. I think it was back then it was a K-line soft top. I didn't have any hard top with it.
Okay. So in the winter times, or the rainy season in Southern California, you had quite the vehicle.
Yeah. Fortunately, it wasn't my daily driver. I think at the time I had like an old 72 Buick Riviera that I used to drive to work. And, because by Sunday night, the Land Cruiser was usually broken and I wouldn't be able to drive it to work anyways. So
there you go.
I had the old Buick for a while that I drove to work. Yeah.
So what kind of jobs were you working then? You'd go to work Mondays and have to take the Buick. Were you wrenching at that point?
I wasn't. I was doing like side work, but I actually worked at Kern Foods in City of Industry, where they make the nectars and jellies, jams, all that kind of stuff. I was a warehouse supervisor there, and then I worked on four-wheel drives at night and stuff.
Okay.
I worked there for 3 or 4 years.
Did you belong to any clubs?
Just like the Azusa Canyon deal, it was very informal, but there would be like 3,000 people there on every weekend, and you had kind of a big circle of friends that you wheeled with, and, mud bog, hill climbed, everything that was down there. Wasn't too many rocks down there at the time, but
Okay.
Lots of big hill climbs and stuff and lots of mud.
So at about what time did All-Pro, or did you have a transition from Kern Foods to All-Pro?
So All-Pro came much later. I ended up going back, meeting a guy in Azusa Canyon who was, I don't know exact, he was like kind of buying car dealerships in the Midwest and stuff. And he had this dream of building what he called a muscle truck, which was like a truck with 38-inch tires or whatever, and a big block and stuff that they would sell on the dealer showrooms, He talked me going back to Missouri, where we were going to build these trucks, and that we were going to have a monster truck kind of deal, and I was going to be the driver and do car crushes and supposedly, like compete against Bigfoot, who had just got started. And, this was the early 80s. So I actually went back there. I was back there for a year and did some car crushing and stuff like that. And and worked at a Ford dealer there back in Southwest City, Missouri. I kind of got my start at a dealership there and ended up working. When I came back to California, I immediately got a job at a Ford dealer here and doing transmissions and rear ends, and did that for about 10 years before I started All-Pro. But the whole time I was four-wheeling, going out to, doing the Rubicon and Fun in the Desert and all these runs down here, and building my own parts, and people would see them on my truck, and where'd you get that bumper, where'd you get this or that, and I told them I built it, and pretty soon that turned into All-Pro, and I quit my job one day, and that's it. That was in
didn't look back,
94. Never look back.
We all have those moments.
Yeah.
Those moments where we just look at it, what we've been doing, and said, we got to have a better life than this. And then, then we work our asses off for that better life, but at least we're calling our own shots.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the whole deal, is to, be my own boss, call my own shots, and make my own decisions, good or bad. I mean, at least they're my own, and not taking direction from somebody who I don't agree with that direction,
So All-Pro, you guys were in Temecula, is that correct?
Hemet.
That's right, Hemet.
Hemet, yeah.
And is that where you started it at, or did you start somewhere else and then end up moving there?
No, I moved to Hemet in 88 and started at the Ford dealer in Hemet, and so that's where I started All-Pro from. Yeah.
88, okay. And so you, if you were running the Rubicon, you came across the Wardens and Hardy and all those guys, didn't you?
Oh yeah.
The
they
Toys
had some
on
really
the
nice.
Club. Yeah.
Yeah, they had some really nice Land Cruisers that I was very envious of, and yeah, they had a lot of nice stuff.
So let's talk about All-Pro. The whole basis behind that company. You started off, I guess, building stuff for yourself, and then people wanted parts that you built, right?
Right. Yeah, I was working at the Ford dealer and building my own parts and building stuff for people on the side. I mean, I would get off work at 5 o'clock, and I would come home and work till 2 o'clock in the morning, my little shop at my house, and pretty much every night, and then on weekends I would go wheeling, and then back at it Monday morning, but I was building bumpers and sliders and skid plates and, suspension kits, just all that kind of stuff for Toyotas.
When did All-Pro become a really substantial business where you just, no more dealership, I'm going to do this full time? And did you start off with employees, or did you do it all yourself 24 hours a day? How did that work out?
I started by myself. I mean, it didn't take long before I had a couple employees, and you can't do it by yourself. You can't get anything done, by yourself. But it didn't take more than a few weeks before I had a couple mechanics / fabricators, and I was 1996, July 96 is when I left the Ford dealer for good, and All-Pro was open full time. Had it for 23 years, I guess. And
let's talk about that. When I interviewed Lance Clifford, he mentioned that you were his first advertiser on Pirate.
Yeah, that's what he tells me. He's told me that a few times.
He really thanks you for that, because that made him understand that there was a world out there beyond working for somebody else.
Yeah, we were the first paying advertiser on Pirate 4x4. So. And it worked, worked for him, but it worked really good for us too. I mean, it was awesome place, and it blew up like you can't believe. So
it was a good place. So name some of the guys that came through. I know that there's a king of the King of the Hammers that worked for you, if I remember right. Didn't Slauson work for you at one time? Yeah,
I hired Randy. He had just moved down from Oregon. I think his wife was going to nursing school at Loma Linda, and he was looking for a job. And I didn't have much for him. He seemed really enthusiastic, but he was basically doing cleanup work and stuff and pushing a broom, and he would he would sit there and look at my, what we call Truggy, which is our little badass Toyota rock crawler, and I was really proud of it, and it was a nice truck, and he would tell me all the things that were wrong with it,
Sounds like Randy.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, what does this guy know, right? I mean, he's come a long ways, I'm proud of him. And he worked at All-Pro for a few months, I think, and moved on. But he's come a long ways, very talented fabricator, and he's done well.
Let's talk about competition with the rock crawling. I know that you came out to our first series event in 2002 with Cal Rocks that we did at Lions Pride Park. But was there any events prior to that? Were you involved with the CRCA or any of those events down, any other events?
The CRCA, I think, was in 2003 we got involved with that. But prior to Cal Rocks in 2002, I did Pro Rock. I did like the Warren rock crawling series with Bob Hazel. Went to, I think, Farmington, and there was one in Johnson Valley, and went to Montrose, Colorado. I did like a handful of events before that 2002 Cal Rock event.
Okay. And that event, I remember you injured your back.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the one that Nelson was there with you, John Nelson?
Yeah, he was there with me. I'd known him for years prior to that. He just lived down the street from me. We used to race stock cars and stuff together, circle track stuff. So he was there watching. I was trying to get him involved. Come check this out. He'd been in the desert his whole life, but not, all the go fast stuff, not rock crawling. So he came to check it out. And of course, what happened to me at the event. I broke 3 vertebrae in my back on that.
Right.
I think it was the end of the first day or whatever. But
I'm sorry to see that happen. That's for sure.
Yeah, that was no fun. But
no, but from that, you guys developed the groundbreaking car.
Yeah, I actually sat on a milk crate on top of a surface plate, and they kind of built the car around me. All of them, like the wheelbase, track width, front rear weight percentages, all that were taken off my Toyota Truggy. It was the exact same dimensions, as far as track width and wheelbase and ride height and all that kind of stuff. Then it came to, do you put the engine in the front? He asked me, you need the most improvement on from the driver's seat when you're on the course, and it's visibility. I mean, trying to see out the front of that Toyota truck with the big fenders and all that stuff on was that was the toughest part. Even you have a spotter, but it's really gives you a lot more confidence when you can see it right there in front of yourself. With no body on it, the driver's position, biased towards the front, the engine's in the back. So the engine went in the back, and that was kind of, everybody knows the rest.
Well, some people do. We're trying to bring this history up to all the guys that got involved in off-roading with the JKs and, that are overlanders and are looking. So that vehicle ended up with the name Tiny. I don't know how the name was coined. I know that it didn't look like there was any 2 tubes on that were parallel or in line that matched size-wise. Can you talk about what was going through John's mind, Nelson, when throwing tubes in there?
He's a real creative guy, and when it came to all the link mounts and suspension and all that kind of stuff, it was so compact that you had to put everything where it fit. You couldn't just, if you would have laid it out more conventional like most people do, it would have ended up being a really big vehicle, So to keep it as small as possible, you had to fit link tubes and brackets and stuff in unconventional places, But it all worked. So.
Sure did. So you guys built that came up with that concept and started building it in 2002, and then you debuted it. Where was the first place you ran it?
The first place we ran it was at the CRCA at the Jeff Knowles at the Wooden Nickel Ranch there in Menifee, California. I think at the time it was like a one-day deal, and it was 20 minutes from our house, so we went over there and ran it.
Were you instantly impressed by it, or were there a lot of, I know that typically there's new car blues, and that thing was so new, meaning, it wasn't conventional. I mean, it was so far out of the box. Did it work magically, or would you guys have to go back and tweak some things?
I had to go back and tweak some things. It worked pretty well, but we actually broke at the first event. Broke a rear link arm on the right rear, and it just wasn't. It was made really lightweight. We didn't really know the limits. How far can you go before it's not going to be strong enough? But we learned on that day, at the very first day. So I think we still ended up third or something like that. Very capable vehicle. I knew, we'd gone out and tested it a couple times, and it was a completely different driving experience than what I was used to.
Yeah, visibility and everything else in that car was phenomenal. I still see that car once a year. The gentleman that owns it right now is down in Mexico, in Salito, and competes it down there in events, and he comes up to our events in Texas. It's always a treat to see that car. I mean, it was always my favorite car out of any car that's ever been built. To take something that's never been done, produce something that everybody I've talked to says the first time they saw it, which a lot of them saw it at that super crawl, was the first time they'd seen it. And everybody was looking at it like, yeah, that's not going to work. How is that going to work?
Right.
And then
that a lot.
Yeah. And I remember my first conversation with John Nelson. He called me up and he said, "Hey, Rich, I want you to allow us to put water in the tires because water's free." And I said, "John, water might be free, but it's not really free because once we start putting water in the tires, there's a whole bunch of other things that's going to happen. Guys are going to start braking more. The cars are going to become way more capable, and to make it exciting, or to make it so that the cars are challenged, we're going to have to make courses that may end up being more dangerous." He goes, "Well, just remember, water's free." We argued, and he goes, "Well, Craig Stump has already said that he'd do it." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not Craig Stump." So we had a long conversation that night on the phone. And he finally got me when he said, "Well, Rich, here's the deal. I'm going to put weight where I want it. And if that means I got to weld $15,000 worth of tungsten to the rims, I'm going to do that. And then I'm the only one that's going to be able to afford it. So water's free." And I'm like, "Damn you, all right, fine. Water's free." So not only did he change, that vehicle changed the way everybody thought about how rock crawlers should be built, but he also changed the whole sport by, pushing that envelope of weighting the vehicle and all the different things. Incredible mind, but, damn. Rock crawling used to be a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
You could take a trail rig, So what did you guys hear when you showed up with Tiny and you as the driver? I know Larry wasn't your first spotter. Somebody else was?
I had the first 3 or 4 events, I had a different spotter at every one. We were trying to find the exact right one, the best guy. I had a couple local guys here. Chris Geiger spotted at the CRCA deal, which that was like a time to speed deal. So he was mostly running, trying to get out of the way.
He wasn't real good at getting out of the way. I saw him get hit a couple of times as a cameraman.
At that first Supercrawl, Mitch Guthrie spotted for me. And about halfway through the event, I re-injured my back from when I broke it at the Cow Rocks. It had only been, I don't know, 6 months or so since that happened, and I wasn't fully healed. So I drove it the first day. I couldn't drive it the next day. I couldn't even move, you know. So Mitch drove it the second day, and it wasn't super impressive, you know, and in hindsight, we were disappointed, but we looked at that, and that was the last event of 2002, and we're like, well, now everybody's going to go work on their rigs all winter, and nobody's going to be worried about Tiny, because it was different, but it didn't really impress anybody yet. So that was kind of if we would have went and won that Supercrawl the first time, then everybody would have been changing their rigs that winter to try to get a lot better, but because I think we finished 15th or something, nobody gave it a second thought, and then we practiced all winter long, and I hooked up with Larry, and that worked out awesome. I mean, we were just the two right personalities to work together. We communicated perfectly. When we would go pre-walk a course, we would see the same things, without even, there was never any arguments, we basically see the same lines. It just worked out perfect, so, and that kind of, that changed it. And then, having Jon as a coach, it was great team.
Larry mentioned Jon as a coach, more than just a coach in the rock crawling, but a coach in life and business as well, about how to be a professional, because he brought that over from the desert racing and the roundy round stuff that he did. And I'm not even sure all the different types of racing that he was involved with, but that was one of the things.
Yeah, he owns several businesses that are all successful. And there's a lot of times I would just go over to his house and sit on the couch and ask him questions. Hey, I'm struggling at work, and I need some advice. And he would usually give it to me, and he would always tell me, just remember that advice I just gave you is worth exactly what you paid for it. So, it's a little joke, but got great advice from Jon. Yeah.
So with all that practice and the coaching, you guys came back in 2003 and you ran UROC, you ran ARCA, you ran Pro Rock, you ran Cal Rocks, and you guys kind of like put the smackdown on everybody, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think we ran 18 events in 2003, and we won, I believe, 13 or 14 of the 18. And if we didn't win, we were second and third. I think we got one fifth place finish once when I think we broke a diff or something one time. But we were always in contention.
So then you guys have been winning. You go into 2004 and you continued to win. Wasn't there like a long stretch of wins? Or
we won in 2004. I think we ended up finishing second in the UROC series in 2004, but I missed 2 events. And Larry actually drove it in those events, but in those 2 events, but I missed it. And, we ended up second that year. Tracy Jordan won, and we didn't do near as many events. I had things going on at work and in life, and that was it.
I remember you guys competing. The one time that I remember that where there was a lot of competition going on between you and Tracy was, and I think it was more John Nelson and Tracy than you. And it was in 2003, I think it was, with we were at Cougar Buttes, and it was the weekend, I think it was a week before the Baja Rocks event, or maybe 2 weeks before the Baja Rocks event. And I remember Jon getting under Tracy's skin, just on him on every course. Instead of paying attention to you guys running, he's just shadowing Tracy.
He
And-
followed Tracy around and just kind of stared him down. And
Yeah.
Tracy ended up coming up to me after he'd done that a few times and yelled at me, you know, and said, you know, tell your boss to quit trying to intimidate me, you know. So,
I remember that
yeah,
Tracy rolled on like the last obstacle. Well, it was obviously his last obstacle. Smoked the motor. Just
yeah.
got pretty upset. We had a long discussion about it. I called Jon after that and said, hey, we need to lay off, you know, while people are on course, you know, let them run their course. Don't try to, you know, this isn't circle track. I don't want fights in the pits. I don't want anything going on. So, you know, let guys run, beat them on the rocks. I remember Tracy was highly upset because he had to replace a motor, and it all worked out for him because he went to Baja Rocks and won that event. Of course, nobody ever got paid from that event, but
I remember that.
yeah. So let's talk about the competing against Tracy. I know that he's a fierce competitor. We've seen that for years. He does not like to lose, nor does anyone. But, you know, Tracy's always been kind of, you know, at the top of the game, especially when he's working with his brother. They're pretty fierce competitors, and they really study what other people are doing, but they have their own ideas. What was it like? What was it like competing against him?
Competing with Tracy was probably the best thing for me. Like I think he's the best pure rock crawler that's ever been in the sport. You know, I thought that back then, and I still think that, you know, that he's an awesome driver, very meticulous in what he does, or doesn't get rushed and frazzled and stuff. He's just he is super good. It's, you know, my pleasure to compete against him, and he brought out the best in me and our team, you know, because there's nobody we wanted to beat more than Tracy Jordan.
I would say that you're correct in that. I agree that that overall, I think that he is probably the most accomplished over a long period of time, and with various vehicles, you know, being able to perform at a pretty high level. Not only that, but, you know, just some of the big trails that he's opened up in Arizona and other places. He seems to be completely fearless, and I think that helps.
Yeah, no, he was fearless, and he did some crazy lines that we'd watch and go, you know, wow, well, we weren't going to do that, but now we have to do that, right? Because Tracy did it, and whether it was a bonus line or whatever it was, but yeah, he was definitely fearless, and, you know, I got the utmost respect for him and his team, whether it was with Don Robbins or his brother. We had a lot of fun competing against him, and that was one of the highlights of, you know, the short time that I did it, you know, was getting to compete against him. So.
And what about drivers like Shannon Campbell? I know Shannon, it seemed to me that Shannon was always trying to perfect the vehicle instead of learning what he could do in the vehicle. So it seemed like almost every event he'd come out with almost a new vehicle.
Yeah, he seemed to have new vehicles all the time, and maybe not enough time to get used to it and what it could do, or learn it before he switched to something else. But I mean, he was one of the coolest guys to watch on course, because you know, he was always exciting and a lot of throttle, and you never knew what he was going to do, you know. But great guy, love the guy, and I always had fun competing against him too.
What did you compete against? I'm sure you did. Johnny G.
Yep, Johnny G. We had a good battle in Reno. Was it Moon Rocks at ARC event, and I think it was they called it B7. It was like a famous obstacle there, and nobody had ever climbed it. We were on day one, was our turn to climb it, and we made the climb, and we're leading the event. And his time was on day two to climb it, and nobody else had climbed it all weekend, just us. And if he made the climb, he won the event by like 1 point over us. And if he didn't make the climb, we won the event. And it came down to the very end of the second day. He came up on that obstacle and he made it. He was the only one other than us to make it, and just barely edged us out for the win there in Reno.
Wow. Okay. I remember being at that event. I remember it being cold and windy.
Yep.
Especially on Sunday, because when I tried to drive home, I had to put chains on to get to Placerville.
Right.
Which was crazy.
Yep.
So who else was there that you competed against back in those early years that either you thought had potential and then eventually got there, or that you just liked to compete against because they were always on the edge?
Well, as far as like just liking to compete against, it'd be Mitch Guthrie. Me and him been like best friends for like since 1983 or 84. We met and actually started wheeling together in Azusa Canyon, back in the early 80s, and have been friends ever since. So whatever we do, whether it was with, Land Cruisers, we're both into Land Cruisers, or competing rock crawling or razors or whatever, we've always brought out the best in each other and enjoyed beating each other, So competing against Mitch, was always fun.
I would imagine that led to some good bench racing before and after the events.
Oh yeah. There's obviously good times and bad times, but yeah, we've always had a good time competing against each other and like you said, bench racing about it.
So out of all the places that you competed with Tiny, where was your favorite location?
That's pretty easy, was Farmington, because I believe we won every event we ever went to in Farmington. I think we won 5 times there in different associations and stuff. So, Tiny was a good, big climber, some of the big climbs and stuff like that. And I enjoyed that. So, I mean, we always did good there. And that was our best place. Johnson Valley would probably be the second place. We won a couple events there, and I love going to Johnson Valley. So.
And what would you say, besides being that super crawl, what was the most memorable win that you ever had in Tiny?
Gosh, I mean, they were all memorable. We won so many events over a 2-year period, I think 18 events or something. But, the first one in Johnson Valley was big because that was our first kind of major win. The Moab event was huge. I think we won by 2 full. We didn't even have to do the last 2 courses. We were like 80 points ahead. So it was a killer weekend. Like everything was just clicking. I don't think we hit a cone all weekend. Everything just clicked in Moab, and that was like our biggest win as far as a point spread, biggest win. We had a lot of good ones. All the Farmington events, had a lot of good events. Put up or shut up, won twice. Those were good. So I mean, they're all good. I think in 2 years we finished 5th 2 different times, and those are our worst finishes ever. And they're both at Cedar City, which was my least favorite place to go. I think just because of that, and we never won at Cedar City, so that's pretty much won everywhere else we went.
That's kind of amazing. Because Cedar is, we still do Cedar. In fact, we did Cedar twice this year in 2020 with a regular season event that we moved there because we couldn't go to Donner because of the COVID. So then we had to move our finals out of Farmington because the state wouldn't allow us to do an event. So we moved it to Cedar for finals, and we used an area that hadn't been used in years. Everybody really looked forward to going back there. And so we're putting it on the schedule again for this season. It always was good for crowds.
Yeah, they did get a lot of people there.
It helped me out with course design back then because I didn't go to a lot of the ARCA events or to the Pro Rock events then, did they do a lot of breakovers?
There were a lot of breakovers, and which that could hang us up, but we had very little up travel in the shocks and almost all droop. So even when the belly hung up on, just say on a breakover rock, the axles dropped down far enough usually to touch the ground, so it could help get us off. So it was low, but we had a lot of droop travel in it so that, the axles dropped down as far as possible to hopefully gain some kind of traction.
Did you run the BFGs on that the whole time that you ran it?
Yeah. We were sponsored by BFG, and that's all we ever ran.
Was there any consideration of ever? I know that you started off with the truggy, and that we talked about the truggy and what happened at that event there in Lions Pride Park, and then you and John Nelson sat down to create a new car, which ended up being tiny. Was there any idea about trying to use any Toyota parts, being that that's what, where your background was?
Yeah, we discussed it. I mean, we thought about using Toyota axles because we were just going for lightweight, but decided in the end that they wouldn't take the punishment, that you have to dish out.
What other partners did you have back then? I know you said you partnered with BFG. What are the other partners that helped you out during those times?
We didn't have a lot of sponsors. Alcoa Wheel came on and, supplied us wheels and stuff, but CTM axles helped us out with the axles. That's really all I know of.
Okay.
And we didn't actually go out and pursue sponsors. Kind of wanted to do it on our own, and that's just the way it was.
Did you compete down there in Baja?
No, I never did.
Okay.
No.
All right. So did you ever do any desert racing?
Never did. No.
Never did. Okay.
No.
And after Tiny, was that kind of the end of the rock crawling competition scene for you?
That was the end. Yeah, that was the end of the competing, at the end of 2004. I was still rock crawling every weekend, going to events for work. Me and Larry and a gang of friends, we would go out to the Hammers almost every weekend for 3 or 4 more years and, just have fun.
What was the product at All-Pro that you think that really drove that business?
The main product was the high steer kit for the Toyota. I invented that myself back in, I had the first one, I think, in 98, 99, right in there. Made the arms, made everything from scratch. That's when, before we were forging the arms and that kind of stuff, we were welding the arms together one by one. That was our biggest product for years. I think we ended up selling over 25,000 of those high steer kits. And then also came out with a solid axle conversion kit. Toyota went to the independent front end in '86, came out with a kit that an average guy can do at their home shop or in their garage or driveway to convert their truck. It was all the pieces needed to convert the truck from IFS to a solid axle. And that was a huge seller for years and years,
So most of the stuff that you sold or you did at All-Pro was for the do-it-yourselfer, or did you bring cars in and build trucks or cars for people?
We did. For the first 3 years, we built a lot of trucks. When I first started doing the solid axle swaps, people would drive their truck from all over the country to All-Pro, and they would fly home. They would fly back in 2 weeks and drive the truck home with a solid axle in it. We did that for 3 or 4 years until we were doing so many parts, and we had a big line of parts that we just couldn't do installs anymore. The parts were much more profitable and less time consuming than building trucks from scratch. So we kind of quit doing the building trucks. We did a few one-offs here and there, and we always prototyped our own parts at All-Pro. So that's what took most of the shop space was, we would developing new products, So we did all that in-house. So.
Awesome. So when did you decide to retire and step away from All-Pro?
That was towards the end of 2017. I got a call from Matt Messer, who was interested in buying it. We were up in Montana at the time. We'd moved the company up to Montana. I just felt like it was time, time to do it. I'd lost some of the, the passion for the product and all that. Lasted for years and years, but the industry had changed. It seemed like nobody was rock crawling. I couldn't really I tried to get into the overlanding stuff. We made lots of product for the overlanders, but I wasn't really into it, I wasn't passionate about it. And when you're not passionate about something, you can't be that successful at it. So just lost some of the drive for that, so just decided the opportunity came to get out, and I took it. I'm happy Matt has it, and I think he's doing pretty good with it, and wish him the best.
So my son called me and said, guess what I just bought? And I was like, I don't know. And he goes, well, I was talking to Jon Bundrant, and I went, oh, you got the Truggy? And he said, yep, I got the Truggy. So you parted with your baby.
Yep, he was here yesterday and picked it up, loaded it onto the back of his truck, and I think he's home with it now.
That's why I got that call today. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I had sold it in 2009 to a friend. I built a real nice Land Cruiser, with a V8 and all those really nice Land Cruiser R40s, and decided it's time to get rid of Truggy and, build something different and come out with some more Land Cruiser parts for the business and everything. So I sold it, and then he ended up selling it. Sold about 3 times over the next 5 years, I believe. It ended up in Minnesota, and I got a call at work when I was in Montana. This guy had it, and he'd rolled it a bunch of times. It was in pretty bad shape, a lot of rust, and asked me if I'd be interested in it, and immediately I got emotional about it, and I got to have it back, and, I'm going to restore it and stuff. And I bought it sight unseen. I wasn't going to go back to Minnesota in the wintertime. And, I sent him the money, sent me the truck, and it wasn't exactly like, it was far worse than the pictures he sent me. And I just never, with us moving back to California and selling the business, and it's just kind of been sitting out back, and I've not really doing any rock crawling anymore, and 4-wheel drives. We do the side-by-side stuff, and we go rock crawling in them and go to Glamis and that kind of stuff. But I just never got the ambition to fix it back up. So I decided, after it's sitting in the backyard for 2 years, I just decided to put it on one of the Facebook pages, the Rock Crawling Classifieds. And I didn't even know if people would remember it, and I had like 80 responses in like 20 minutes.
Wow.
And, people remembered it. And I had several people wanting to buy it. And even after Rich said that he would buy it, I had several people say, if it doesn't go through, here's my number, call me, I'll take it, and whatever. But I'm glad Rich got it. And I know he seems pretty ambitious about getting it fixed back up.
Yeah, he's gonna put together a rebuild thread for our magazine, For Low, and he's gonna put, we'll have a complete series of articles and photos and everything else of the resurrection of the Truggy, the All-Pro Truggy. So that'll be kind of cool. He called me today and asked me if I'd be interested in that. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's why we have the magazine, because people want to read that kind of stuff. They don't want to read about JKs and JLs.
Yeah.
I mean, even the guys with JKs and
Yeah.
JLs, they want to see what the history was
Right.
and what people are, what people are doing. I mean, I like all the newer vehicles. They're great platforms and they're very capable out of the box, but I'm still old school.
Yep. I agree.
So let's talk about other things that you've gotten into. I know that you drag race again.
Yep. Yeah. Drag racing. Yeah.
Tell me about your car there. What class is it? What are you doing?
It's all extreme drag radial. There's 2 or 3 different associations. It's all 8th mile stuff now. Pretty much everything has gone to 8th mile. It's a 63 Nova. It runs like 420 in the 8th mile. It'd run about a 670 in the quarter mile, about 210 miles an hour.
That's cooking.
Yeah, it's a rush. It's like 3.5 Gs when you let go of the trans brake. It gets your attention, quick. About 2,150 horsepower, and it moves out.
To try to get onto Street Outlaws?
No, I don't know.
If you do,
you gotta have for like the way this car is set up. You have to be at like a prep track. It's got too much power, and like the class I runs on a 275 drag radial, which is like a 28-inch tall by 10 inches wide. So there's a lot of suspension work, and everything has to be set up just right to put 2,100 horsepower down on a 28-inch by 10-inch wide tire. So
absolutely,
you can't just go on the street and even have any chance of hooking up. So.
Okay.
But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would imagine. So where are you doing most of the racing? In Southern California? You're going to Vegas or Arizona?
Vegas, Tucson, Bakersfield, Sacramento, Fontana, just the Southwest mainly. I went back to Texas in January to Dallas and ran for a couple of days back there. That was pretty cool. Racing's really big back there, drag racing. So
yeah, it is
really fun, but mostly the Southwest here. So.
And you mentioned UTVs. What are you running in the UTV? Polaris or?
Polaris, got a Turbo S, got 2 of them, a 2-seater and a 4-seater. And we go to Glamis mostly. We go to Moab at least once a year, and then I'm gonna start going to Sand Hollow, a couple times a year, hopefully. But a little bit of rock crawling with them. We go to Johnson Valley and out to Barstow to go cruising out in the desert. Mostly Glamis. I think we went to Glamis 12 times this winter. So that's like our main deal with them. It's going to Glamis and hauling butt in the sand. We used to go to Glamis years ago when I had my first couple Land Cruisers with straight 6, and we'd go to Glamis and air down to 2 pounds, and you didn't have power to do anything. You had to get a big run at everything. And then you didn't have any suspension, so you're hitting your head on the roof all the time. It's a whole different deal now with all the long travel suspensions, and side by sides have come a long ways, since like the Rhino days and stuff. So
yeah, it's really fun. So are you doing that as a family? You and the wife and?
Yeah, and daughter. My daughter's got a Turbo S, and she's into it probably more than I am.
So I'm gonna touch back on Tiny, and you said Mitch Guthrie. I didn't realize that Mitch had driven the car and spotted. I know that he ended up going to Shannon with all these measurements on a piece of paper and said, build me one of these. And of course it was a Campbell take on it, but he was spying while he was doing that for you.
Yeah, no, let me tell you the story about it. He had been taking measurements for the last 6 months. Like, we didn't know that, but he was measuring every link, measuring angles, just measuring the whole chassis. He drew up blueprints on it from all these measurements. He actually had a blueprint, and he was on his way to Shannon's, and he calls me up, and I didn't know anything about it. he calls me and says, meet me up at the freeway in Beaumont, because he passes, pretty close to Hemet when he's going out to Arizona. And I met him up there at the Denny's. He's in his truck. He has his doors locked and his window up, and he holds the blueprint up to the window for me to see. I didn't know where he was going or what. He has the door locked, and he starts laughing with this complete blueprint of Tiny that he had drawn up over the last 6 months. And he took it to Shannon, and they knocked it off. That's the story right there. And of course, Shannon built a whole bunch of them that they weren't exact, but they were close. He didn't use the Volkswagen engine. And I think Shannon may have, in one of his, he's putting Ecotechs in them, and they work really well. That's how they got copied so quick, really similar to Tiny. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the biggest form of flattery.
Yeah.
Were you involved at all with the Scrapper project? With the cars that came out?
No.
No.
So Jon owned Tiny the first year. He paid for everything, and the winnings. We won a lot of money that first year. There were some big payouts, and we were splitting the money between me and Larry and Jon. And at the end of the year, Jon said, "Okay, I want to do this now. I want to drive and have a car." And what he learned off doing Tiny, he knew that he could make improvements. There was a few, not major improvements, but there was a lot of minor improvements that were made on Scrapper. Jon didn't want to pay for the Tiny program the next year, so he offered to sell it to me, which I bought it, and I paid for it, 2004. But and then at the end of the year, I sold it. So. But yeah, Scrapper. He built Scrapper, and go ahead.
I was to say the one thing that I noticed the biggest difference between Scrapper and Tiny is that Scrapper is a lot easier for guys. Those chassis are easier for guys to put rear steer in, because of the back end is narrower. All the suspension angles and tube work is narrower, so that they can put in the rear steer. I noticed a lot of those buggies have all gone rear steer now.
Yeah, he didn't do it with the intention of putting rear steer in it, because we were actually against rear steer at the time. But he put a smaller motor in it, and the smaller, narrower motor let him narrow up the chassis in the back. So that was kind of the reason why it was narrow. And it was lighter than Tiny. I think it was 130 pounds lighter than Tiny. They didn't have a weight rule the first year, but I think the next year when Scrapper came, there was a weight rule. And Scrapper was 600 pounds under the weight. But you can make that up with lead in the front tires. I think we're running like 250 pounds of lead in each front tire, a lead shot. So, it evolved to get that much weight in water. The water was almost to the top of the tire, and that really affected the center of gravity and braking and steering. But if you could get 250 pounds of lead shot, wasn't even up to the bottom of the rim. So it didn't really affect the steering that much or the braking, and it certainly kept the center of gravity right down at the ground.
It's amazing where rock crawling is gone nowadays. I finally got to where I dropped the rear steer penalty. So Unlimited is gone all rear steer buggies. It's helped with the resurgence of rock crawling, because after 2008, 2009, 10, that housing recession and everything that we went through, it really hurt the sport. Guys decided to go fast. I remember it was, some of the competitors were like, well, I might as well just write a check and send it to Tracy Jordan or, Shannon Campbell or Brad Lovell and not show up to the event. And so they all went racing with Dave at King of the Hammers, because everybody can go fast. You may not even be closest to the fastest one out there, but you're driving as fast as you can to your ability. So it's more fun. It's not as technical.
Right.
I still enjoyed the technical a lot more. We did Dirt Riot for a few years, where we were creating like a regional series for racing to teach guys how to race and where they could get their start before jumping into Ultra 4. And we just went back to doing just the rock crawls this year, which with this COVID thing is probably a good thing, because I don't know how I would have gotten 20 events off this year with losing 2 months already, of our schedule. So that was great foresight, I guess, for us to drop the Dirt Riot. But what do you see for the future for Jon? You got any plans business-wise? Going to make a resurgence, come back, or?
So the racing is really expensive. So I got to make a little money to cover the racing. So I'm actually making some parts for drag cars now, like 4-link kits, links and brackets. And I've got about 6 or 8 products that I'm working on right now. I'm just getting started and just starting to sell them, but that's what I'm doing with that. That's my hobby and kind of my business again. So just kind of like All-Pro, but that's what I'm doing. I think about the 4-wheel drive industry a lot. I can't come back in it for about 2.5 more years because of a non-compete agreement that I signed, but maybe someday, certainly I think about it. So.
Well, you're still a young man.
Okay. Relatively. I don't feel young sometimes. But,
Neither do I.
Right. Yeah.
Too many years running around on the rocks.
Exactly.
So is there anything that you can think of that you'd like to touch bases on? Anything you want to ask me? Anything about I know that you probably watch a lot of the things that are happening in the sport. Maybe you don't at all, which is understandable as well, since it's been so long since you've been a competitor, but you're still an enthusiast.
Yeah, and I didn't watch anything for 3 or 4 years probably, but I do now, and I'm interested in what's going on and trying to follow it as good as I can. And most of the guys that I competed with most of them aren't in it anymore. Shannon still is, of course, but most of them aren't. So a lot of the friends I've had from rock crawling are doing something different now, or just living life, or whatever they're doing. But the current competitors, rock crawling competitors, I probably don't know many of them. So
probably Cody Wagoner would probably be the one that you.
Oh yeah, I know Cody. Yeah,
he's still doing it. He took a long break and then came back, and
yeah, he did.
And he's doing
good too. Yeah.
Doing quite well. Yes. Well, cool. I'd like to say thank you very much for coming on board and discussing the history from your point of view and your background in All-Pro. Once you get the drag racing business going, I have a lot of friends in that part of the racing as well, especially back east in the Midwest. So when you need help, or you want some help putting that name, your name out there, tag me in Facebook land, and I'll be more than happy to pump your stuff for you.
Well, I appreciate that, Rich. And
no worries.
Appreciate you asking me to be on here, and it's been fun.
Okay, great. Well, you have a nice evening, and take care, and we'll catch you somewhere. I sure hope so.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll see you in an event somewhere.
All right, Jon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.